USA Plantation Strategy, or the Great Replacement Theory, of episode 152. I am Rod Murphy, and this is Growing Up Poor in Irish Boston, a series of my 1950s era Irish Boston songs, history, jokes, and stories. And never let the truth interfere with a good story. This episode will discuss a theory that may be described as malevolent entities attempting to replace native-born Americans with immigrants. It is called the Great Replacement by some. Is this idea real? First, let me deal with only Boston and Massachusetts and not the entire nation. In 2025, Boston's total population was estimated at 660,000. Also in 2025, the foreign bond population was almost 30%. In 2023, 180,000 immigrants were living in Boston, so there was a growth, according to the U.S. Census Bureau, between 2023 and 2024. About 90,000 international immigrants moved to Massachusetts. So the foreign bond population is and still growing. Approximately 26% of the foreign bond population residing in Massachusetts is white, according to data from the Migration Policy Institute. This white demographic group represents a significant portion of the state's immigrant population. However, there is a much higher total of non-white individuals from places like Brazil, the Dominican Republic, India, and Haiti. Boston's Asian immigrants make up 26%. Black immigrants make up 13%. And as I said, the white immigrants make up 26%. That same 26% applies to Boston's foreign-born white population. While the overall state population is approximately 78% white. And reversely, between 2006 and 2022, Massachusetts experienced a net out-migration of white residents while seeing a small gain in residents of color. In other words, more white folks are leaving Boston and those white folks moving in, and further, the opposite is true for non-whites. So that phenomenon is causing much discussion for and against the theory that USA globalists and leftist politicians are engineering a national mass immigration, particularly from non-white and non-European populations into America. This theory contends that the end game is to replace the native populations, especially, but not exclusively, the Caucasians. This is said to occur through high immigration levels combined with higher birth rates among immigrants and the already proven declining birth rate among Native Americans. This phenomenon ultimately would shift demographics, culture, and particularly political power. There is a religious angle also in this, according to the theorists. Some say that those same evildoers want to replace Christianity. This theory originated primarily from French writer Renaud Camus in his 2011 book Le Grand Replacement. Camus supposedly took earlier ideas from far-right circles. The idea has spread widely in Europe and now in the USA. In Europe, the conspiracy theory involves migration from Africa, the Middle East, and Asia, with some politicians in France, Hungary, and Ireland referencing it and criticizing it directly. Of course, most demographic and policy experts reject that theory. They say it's a politically weaponized interpretation of real trends in low fertility societies. Note, I never trust so-called experts on anything. Demographic facts show immigration plays a major role today in offsetting population decline in many Western countries due to fertility rates below replacement level, which is 2.1 children per woman. In the USA, in other words, birth minus deaths. So net immigration supposedly is growing. The population is supporting workforces and is funding pensions and is paying taxes and is countering aging societies. The idea is politically charged in the USA and has gained traction among Republican and conservative circles and others. Figures like Elon Musk, Tucker Carlson, and others argue that this immigration scheme is changing America's demographics and is possibly being used for electoral advantage by Democrats. My question, is this really a coordinated plot to erase or subordinate native populations for political gain? This theory conjectures that the purpose is to add new voters to dilute elections and also perhaps to destroy American culture. It jibes with the reality that immigration and descendants of immigrants are projected to drive future population growth in the USA. So some state this as proof of native populations actually being offset because of the low birth rates, while at the same time the second-generation immigrant population is growing. The United Nations so-called experts frame this replacement migrations in a neutral, technical sense, as if they were not involved personally. Instead, they were teaching a course in history. The UN postulates that immigration is needed to maintain population stability and economic vitality amid low fertility. A 2000 UN report even explored actions directing replacement migration actions for aging population areas. However, it says it was not a UN policy prescription for a deliberate ethnic or cultural replacement. Note, as I said before, I never trust so-called experts on anything. Do I believe that in that conspiracy theory? Let's see. First, there is no such thing as a conspiracy of more than one person. Once you recruit your first conspirator, you lost your secrets, potentially, and in reality. Each new conspirator further ensures the leaking of the conspiracy secrets. Second, the United Nations, the USA, and state bureaucrats are politicians. Some of the supposed malefactors of this replacement theory. Other wealthy non-government people are suspects also. In my lifetime, the cause for most human problems is the incompetence of public officials. This might be one of those screw-ups. Stupidity, not malevolence. Plus, there are counter-arguments that the demographic shifts are actually driven by economics, such as labor needs and also humanitarian factors. That is a reality and not a secret plot. Many countries face workforce shortages and compete for skilled migrants. Those experts countering the conspiracy theory argue that immigration does not functionally replace natives in many places today because it's a democratic reality. They counter that the conspiratorial claim of intentional population replacement is a sinister plot and lacks substantiation. Note, again, I never trust so-called experts on anything. I noticed that almost every opinion holder regarding this theory does not refute that there is a substantial change in population going on. So has this ever happened in the past? Yes. There are historical examples of population replacement. The following are 3 examples. The first example affects my family. What was the original and continuing cause for all of Ireland's 500 years of war, strife, and revolution? In my opinion, it was the 16th century British plantation strategy that brought loyal Scottish and English Protestants to Ireland to replace the disloyal and contentious original Catholic population. This is a good example of population replacement. That group of carpetbaggers was settled in County Ulster. They were often given the original Catholic population's homes, land, and estates as bribes to resettle. In 1530, the British overlords actually stole Dublin's St. Patrick's Cathedral from the Catholics and made it the national Anglican cathedral of the Church of Ireland. These interlopers called themselves Ulster folk. Today we call them Scotch-Irish. But they weren't originally Irish. They were mostly Presbyterian and never accepted by the real Irish Catholics that they had displaced, and also not quite trusted by the English who'd sent them there. Some immigrated in the late 1700s for America, when Ireland's economic hardship and religious restrictions made life unbearable for them. Another such population replacement was Palestine after WW II, which was heavily populated with Arab Muslims. But after the Arab-Israeli War in 1948, the population of Jews slowly increased to a majority of 76%. Finally, ask a Maine Passamaquoddy or a Navajo or a Seminole if his people were just replaced by Europeans in a replacement event. Here in the good old US of A, what do you think his answer would be? So, is there a great replacement going on now in the USA? In my opinion, yes. So is that great replacement part of a conspiracy by malevolent actors? Yes, partly. So is that great replacement also caused by reality and by government incompetence? Yes. Thank you for listening to this long but important idea. This is Rod Murphy. Thank you for viewing or listening to my YouTube and podcast episodes. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed them, please hit the subscribe button. It does not cost you anything, and it helps me to grow my audience. Again, my thanks.